Death or Prison podcast brought to you by Lean On Me USA. Today our discussion centers with Florida Department of Corrections Secretary Mark Inch and his plan, Roadmap to Restoration.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Mr. Elmo Golden. To my left, the Florida Department of Corrections Secretary, Mr. Mark Inch. And before we get into the interview, Mr. Inch, I just want to go briefly over a little bit of your background. You were, prior to coming to the Florida Department of Corrections, a retired Major General in the U.S. Army, underneath my old alma mater as well, the U.S. Army. And you served 35 years as a police officer also in the military. And now you're over the Florida Department of Corrections, leading in a way that is going towards restoration, a roadmap to restoration, if you will. Introduce yourself to the listeners in our audience.
Well, thank you, Johnny. First, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you, and the opportunity to speak through you to all those that listen to your podcast. I'm one of them, actually. So I've been here now for 2 years in Florida. I do have a Florida license, so I'm official. And though I spent much of my life, traveling from post to post and operation to operation in my military life, but I grew up in a town called Wheaton, Illinois, which is about 25 miles west of Chicago. My father was a theology professor at Wheaton College, and that happens to also be the college that I attended and did ROTC at. My undergraduate degree is biblical archaeology, so I bring that perspective. And actually, in my younger years, my intent had been to become a chaplain in the military. But I found that as a line officer, I think I had greater opportunity to have a positive impact. And so my personal covenant with the Lord was, as long as you keep me a line officer with opportunities to lead, I will continue to do that. I did not think that would be 35 years, nor the opportunity briefly to lead the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And then, of course, when Governor DeSantis assumed the governorship, he invited me down to be the secretary, and it's been a fast 2 years.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to say something real quick. Just by me reading the information that Johnny has just read, I was totally impressed by it. Of course, the listeners know that I've been incarcerated 2 times, 2 different occasions, and I've probably been in about 10 camps. And during that time, I've seen a lot of secretaries come in and out, but no one has ever impressed me more than you, with the not only the background that you have, but with the way that you're approaching rehabilitation, the transition. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly. So my approach to corrections, and I've done this for a lot of years. I mean, my very first time leading what would be kind of equivalent to a county jail, but it was a area confinement facility at Fort Ord, California, was 1986. So I've been involved in corrections in the professional organizations and the like. I am, a certified corrections executive with the American Correctional Association. But, the basic model that I've used for many years, frankly, it's a biblical model from the book of Micah. Mm-hmm. And what doth the Lord require of us is but to do justly, to love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. And, that's not a bad approach to viewing corrections. I mean, they're absolutely within public safety and the applications of the rule of law in our state, an aspect of justice. And I've heard you gentlemen talk about that, that you haven't quibbled on while you were in the Florida Department of Corrections, which I have to say that the first time I listened, I didn't know you guys had been in the Florida Department of Corrections. I just was introduced to your podcast. But the aspect of justice, if you go to a textbook on corrections, they'll talk about retribution, which is the punishment, which is a deprivation of liberty. You're not supposed to punish in prison. Punishment is the prison, and it's falls on the laws of the state, the sentencing structure of the state, and the like. And of course, people can discuss what is just in that and should, but that's the aspect of retribution. Incapacitation on the justice side is there shouldn't continue to be criminal activity while incarcerated. There shouldn't.
They shouldn't be, right.
No one should get victimized, be it inmate on inmate, be it inmate on staff, be it inmate to the public. We should have the capability. We strive every day to address those who wish to continue criminal behavior while incarcerated. Then you read in the textbooks, of course, the deterrence aspect. I personally don't put too much thought on the deterrence side because I do know that so much crime is done under the influence of alcohol, influence of drugs at the time of the criminal act, intense emotion. Very aware of the studies that show the impact of trauma in one's life then manifesting itself in poor decision making. And so the deterrent aspect, okay, I recognize it. It's there. So if retribution is dealing with past crime, if incapacitation is dealing with the future, deterrence is supposed to address future crime. Okay, so that's on the justice side. The mercy side, an expression of mercy of society, should be on rehabilitation, is what you'll read in the textbooks. And that is to equip, both through treatment, through programs, through education, the ability to succeed once released, or to succeed day by day while still incarcerated. And that's a time-honored aspect of corrections, as we use that term, is really the focus on rehabilitation. Now, of course, it has to be resourced. So where did restoration come from? That's not in the textbooks. I kind of latched onto that is the discussion of what is the role. So you have to look at, I define it as working with intent in the community to facilitate the reentry of returning citizens. I mean,
you say
that's the
working
restoration.
with the intent with people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Do you realize how much support that a person may need while he's incarcerated? Not
Yes.
only by his family, but also by the administration that's there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the aspect of restoration is, if we're going to facilitate the movement from the time incarcerated to the time in the community, that relationship with community can't start on the day of release. What must, I try to visual, what must be more concerning or a sadder situation is my staff taking a man or woman at the end of sentence to the bus station. Here's your $50. Here's your bus ticket. I'll stand here until the bus leaves, but that's all I'm allowed to do. Because, in our case, 2/3 of the men and women that are released from our system do not have follow-on supervision. If there's follow-on supervision, then my staff in community corrections can provide some of that re-engagement into the community. But for 2/3 of the men and women, there is not a relationship. It is the community that has the responsibility. And so that relationship can't start right at release. I want the relationship to start while still incarcerated. In Florida, we have a great tradition of volunteerism in Florida. In years past, very significant numbers. Those numbers decreased, and then COVID hit. And so we're working right now very actively to reach back out to the faith-based community, to secular organizations, to those who have a passion in the future of the men and women who are incarcerated in our system. To me, the best scenario is if a family situation is such that upon release, family is there. To me, that's the best. But we know there's times family won't be there. For whatever the reason is, family won't be there. So if family won't be there, then there needs to be something from the community. The vision is everyone is met at the gate and escorted back. And that only happens if the relationship starts before end of sentence. We are reaching out. The wardens are reaching out locally because we know volunteer base really has a local expression. We certainly have major organizations that will facilitate, be it Prison Fellowship, be it the larger church organizations, Alpha Program, Kairos, and we could go right down the line, that will organize broadly. But the reality is, it's local community, right? And that will come. So at some of our institutions, we have lots of volunteers. Some, it's a smaller volunteer base, and we got to work a lot harder to draw good-hearted people behind the wire to mentor, to engage, and to do that which, as a state, we could never afford. All those hundreds of thousands of hours of engagement that we can have through the volunteer community. So restoration, us acting, though, with intent with the community, is that part of inviting in, and plus it makes our system very transparent when you have a lot of people from the community who will help to come in and will see. I encourage that. But it's also, and frankly, I'll tell you, this is what caught my attention about this podcast. What do you do with every one of your sessions is you tell your listening audience, and especially those returning citizens, you say, come to our website, there's a banner that says, click on it, and you'll link them to a welcoming church. That, you know this from experience, but I know this is powerful. The success of a returning citizen from the community perspective has to be housing, a job, and acceptance in the religious and civic organizations of the community, acceptance back in the community. Without those three, the percentages of success, and I don't talk recidivism rates that often, but success is so much harder without housing, a job, and acceptance. And so what you guys do, what you signal to the listening audience is we have found churches that will welcome returning citizens, help us connect you. And so I know there's a listening audience that's outside the wire. There's a listening audience right now inside the wire. Click on, that's part of success of returning to a community, is connecting with civic and religious organizations. And I appreciate that of you enough that I drove from Tallahassee down here to talk to you, to encourage you to continue what you're doing.
And we appreciate that. I was reading one of your letters that you wrote, which I'm like Elmo. I've never seen a secretary like that. In my tenure, I did 14 and a half years in the Florida Department of Corrections off of a 17-year sentence. And I read one of your letters, and one of your letters was titled Hope. And in that letter, you were connecting with the men and the women inside and letting them know, hey, I haven't been incarcerated, I haven't been on probation, but I have served in military where deployments caused me to be away from my family in adverse circumstances and situations. And you drew the connection between that and how individuals on the inside, their hope is directly connected or tied to the community and that bridge that needs to be made. In your estimate, and there are men and women who are listening who have families who come in to see them, what's some things that they should be or could be telling them to get other people involved? And what level of commitment would you say to someone would they be signing up for as a clergyman or as a pastor?
Great question. Given this podcast, I'll kind of focus it on the faith-based community, which is a very large percentage of our volunteer. The motivations of faith translate very well to a willingness to come into what is, a challenging environment. Let's not, deny the facts that that's a very intimidating environment, even more for someone who's never been exposed to it. I remember the first time, I took my wife in to a facility. We were checking on a veterans dorm program, and we're just walking across the exercise yard. Yeah, no big deal, right? Until I looked over my shoulder and I looked at her eyes. I had to remember, big deal the first time you go on an exercise yard. Part of it is, for those who would have a heart to volunteer, is having the confidence that that it is an environment in which we can address safety, and it's an environment in all the procedures we do, is to create the environment where it's a successful engagement. Just take an example of especially during this period of COVID. Of course, we had to suspend visitation and volunteerism during the height of the pandemic. We worked very hard to hit the point, even though the pandemic's not over, but to allow visitation again, to allow volunteerism again in still a safe way. Many of our volunteers are older retirees. So how great is it that the priority of vaccination within our state is with 65 and older? We absolutely have a volunteer base in the 65 and older, and they have access to vaccines, and it will give them confidence of coming back. For visitation, last time I checked, we were one of 9 systems in the nation that had reinstated visitation, but of course we've reinstated it with a series of protocols. In steps, we are relaxing it. I mean, even now, we do allow a brief hug, embrace at the start and end, so physical contact, but mask on and it's brief, and then back to either side of the table, and controlling it. And we'll continue to assess step by step by step, and also based on availability of vaccinations as we move through the rest of this, because it's important. Just like it's been hard across our state, across the nation, of school closures, civic organizations not meeting, churches not meeting, and all that. I mean, we are social creatures, and it has an impact, and it has an impact in a correctional system as well. It was a very hard decision to say, but we made it very quickly to protect staff in our incarcerated population of suspending visitation, suspending volunteerism, because it has a real impact.
Last year, around the holiday season, there was a letter you wrote about peace and goodwill. It was a very interesting letter. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What made you write it?
Well, so that was actually the first letter in video. I hate doing videos, but my comms team makes me do them. Is the first letter I wrote to staff, volunteers, and inmates together. When I first came here, my first year, every Friday I wrote to staff, and it was really just laying down the foundations of the corrections profession, so we have a common understanding, common expectation. But it's in the second year is when I started doing letters also to the incarcerated population, and as I know you've looked at them, and I'm trying to make each one a positive statement of a positive act, positive action. So after the end of the second year, here we hit the holiday season. Frankly, I was really tired. COVID's been a tough year for everybody, hasn't it? And I just wasn't feeling the Christmas and the holiday season. And I recognize a lot of people weren't feeling it either. And staff, clearly incarceration, we all know holiday periods are exceptionally difficult. So that kind of led to the central theme of that letter of really how we choose to treat each other. How do we focus on relationship? Be it your bunkie, be it, with family, be it all that. In the letter, of course, I, highlighted, the Peanuts Christmas story, and the true meaning of Christmas as reported by Linus, and it really, I kind of wanted it to take that as a pivot coming out of the holiday season of how we can really start shifting to more positive relationship, positive choices. And frankly, for those who choose not to have those positive relationships and frankly prey upon others, there is a better way. There really is a better way. And so, with that letter, seemed appropriate that it should involve everybody, staff, volunteers, and the incarcerated population. It's the exact same message of finding, choose to be somebody who wants to create, who wants to be remembered for creating peace, which, what's the opposite? Violence, and goodwill, where you're actually showing care and compassion for the other person and doing action for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The process of I know that you wrote other letters also, and I know that one that really got to me was finding a solution. And when I read that, that's, we can talk about all the problems, but at the end of the day, we have to have solutions. So when you started putting out those letters, and I just happened through our producer to start reading them, I think I may have told you this before, that I said you're a breath of fresh air, because this was something I had been looking for during my 2 times incarcerated. Like, where is the real help? And when it comes from up top, just like everything else, when it comes from up top, it really blessed the spirit. It blessed our soul, that now we know we got not only just an ear, but we have that action that you're talking about.
And, and as an encouragement, again, what I've written, before any of those letters go out, I have it peer reviewed. That means, the directors read them, the regional directors read them, give suggestions. I write them. I don't have somebody out there writing these letters for me. These are all personally written, but they are improved upon because I use it for interaction. But for the ones that have come out to the incarcerated population, I actually send that to all the staff for them to read and to give them opportunity to come back and say, Secretary, would you not say that? Or Secretary, you're completely off your rocker.
Yeah.
And I don't get those comments. So think of those letters, and as you read those letters, I would suspect there's a perception among the incarcerated that the staff would be resistant to the messages. I throw them a softball to say, change what I'm writing, give me a different perspective, because these letters do signal actual action. And I know we'll talk in the next section, some of the actions that have been signaled in these letters. So there is that opportunity with the staff, right down to the frontline correctional officer. They all have my email address, and very, very little resistance to what you have read in those letters, and now you're seeing. I hope the men and women are seeing the actions and the programs that reflect an approach. Right back to how we started this section of yes, there's an absolute expectation as a system that we uphold justice within the system, but there is an absolute expression of mercy in rehabilitation and restorative and restoration, working with intent with communities to ease reentry in the system, and I hope that is a message of hope. And now we'll just continue to work on the resourcing that comes in behind that.
Mm-hmm. I think the difference between Johnny and I and a lot of the men that are incarcerated is that we made up our mind to do something better with our lives. I think that with what you're adding now to another gamut of guys that can have somewhat of a newsletter about what you're thinking, It gives direction. Let's all get on board because it's something that's going to benefit not only us, but our family, our communities. So I applaud you again.
We've been talking about justice, restoration, how the community can get involved, how there's hope. So for you all who are listening, there is hope. You're hearing it from none other than the Florida Department of Corrections Secretary, Mr. Mark Inch, who we've had the pleasure of talking to this past hour in part one of a conversation that we're going to continue. We're going to be talking about mentoring and this brilliant and beautiful mentoring program that you've instituted last year. And we're going to get into that in our next segment. But you have been listening to the Death or Prison podcast brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Mr. Elmo Golden. To my left, Mr. Mark Inch, Florida Secretary, Department of Corrections. And we say it's death or prison, but we say choose life.
Lean on Me USA, in partnership with Alpha USA Prison and Reentry, wants to help you find a welcoming church, no matter where you live. Please call 314-607-8850.
I can change the world. Each one, teach one. One boy